from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under current rules, public companies are not required to disclose political spending to shareholders. And as a result, corporate executives can spend investor money on political causes without any consideration of shareholder views or the company's public commitments. Dr. Coates, should shareholders of companies that make public pledges expect their company to act in a manner consistent with the stated company policy?
Yes.
And we saw in the wake of January 6th insurrection, many public companies pledged to suspend or reevaluate political donations to members of Congress that sought to stop the certification of President Biden's victory, proving that these donations are a business decision that affects the company's reputation and therefore their bottom line. However, since then, many of these companies resumed their political donations in direct contradiction to their public pledges. So, Dr. Coates, do you believe that corporate political spending is material information that should be disclosed to investors?
On average, yes. I'm a supporter of the Disclose Act and have been since it was first introduced a long time ago. And I'm also a fan of getting rid of the micromanagement of the SEC with the budget writer that has forbidden the SEC from taking up this topic for the past 10 years. It's clearly, for some companies, their political involvement is first order to their strategy. And for them to not even be possibly asked by the SEC to make some disclosures related to that political strategy, to me just seems like an obvious mistake from an investor perspective. It has nothing to do with politics per se. It has to do with corporate strategy connected to political involvement.
Well, I appreciate that, and I fully agree. That's why I've been pushing for years to strengthen the SEC's political spending disclosure rule. We've also introduced the Shareholder Protection Act to allow investors to more directly influence the political spending of publicly traded companies. But enhanced disclosure of relevant information like this, in my mind, is another way to empower investors. The key to empowering investors, in my mind, is a strong disclosure regimen that includes and informs, I should say, consumers and allows them to vote with their wallets. When it comes to voting, many investment fund managers voluntarily issue proxy voting guidelines that outline for investors how the fund tends to vote proxies, as well as general principles that are considered. So, Dr. Coates, do you think this type of disclosure is useful to investors?
I do. And I think if you think about the premises of this bill, as backed by the various co-sponsors, it's that individual investors will lean into their rights as economic capital providers and use them, presumably on an informed basis, to make governance choices. The only way they can do that, the only way this bill could possibly work, even putting aside my worries about cost, would be if they actually had full information about what they were voting on. And if they can't get information about what companies are doing with their money, because remember, this capital flows down to the index funds, which is the focus of this bill, but then it flows down to corporations. So it's their money all the way down. If you want them to have the ability to reasonably exercise governance rights over their capital, then you need disclosure about how that money is being used, and that includes political activity.
Well, thank you. To me, this type of disclosure is exactly what investors need to make informed decisions while still maintaining the accessibility and cost effectiveness of index funds. However, it's also important for investors to be able to verify that the funds are actually voting in line with these principles. How can we make disclosures regarding votes that have been taken more informative and digestible for investors?
Well, the SEC currently has a rule pending that, if adopted, will help. It will improve the detail with which funds have to disclose their votes. I'm also in favor for the big index funds, the ones that are the focus of this bill, to report more frequently than they're currently required. Annually is all that's required now. They actually do it quarterly on a self-enforced basis. They choose to do that. I think they could do it even more frequently because the proxy season lasts for many months. And I think having more real-time disclosure and better disclosure would be the first place to start. That is how we have markets work rather than having law direct operations of companies.
Thank you very much.